So I finally saw Ready Player One last night. I actually read the book a couple years ago and then reread it a couple weeks ago in preparation for the movie, and I can finally say this in one of my reviews. The book was better than the movie. So let's talk about it. So Ready Player One is a Steven Spielberg film based off the book of the same name. The film takes place in a not too distant future where society has started to fall apart and poverty is rampant. So most people spend the majority of their time in a virtual reality system called the OASIS. In the OASIS, people can be whoever they want to be and do whatever they want to do. When the creator of the OASIS dies, he puts forth a challenge for the first person to find 3 keys will both inherit his entire fortune as well as control of the entire OASIS. Our heroes must find the 3 keys and win the prize before an evil corporation is able to gain control of the entire OASIS and change it forever. So I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I can see a ton of people loving it and a lot of people being really annoyed by it at the same time. With that in mind, before I get started, tell me down below in the comment section, what did you think about Ready Player One? Had you read the book beforehand? Give me the full context. Let's have a nice, lively discussion. With that said, let's start talking about the good. And the best thing about this movie is that Steven Spielberg is the master of crafting amazing action sequences, and the world of the OASIS basically gives him an unlimited playground to craft insane action sequences. And so this movie has no shortage of just incredibly cool chase sequences, battle sequences, intercuts into classic movies that you've seen before, all of them phenomenal with the absolute perfection that you expect from Steven Spielberg. In my mind, he is the greatest director of all time, and you see that in the action sequences that are in this film. Also, there's just the visuals of the film really work. I was a little bit nervous about it because so much of it is set inside the OASIS, so it's computer generated, and I wasn't sure if was it gonna feel like I was watching a Pixar movie? Was it gonna take me out of it? And it really doesn't at all. It did not pull me out of this movie one bit. It felt right as you kind of went into the OASIS, and I just bought it that these were real people, and all of it just worked so well. The way the visuals were handled and seeing all this stuff on the screen could be a sensory overload, but it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like a populated world with a bunch of nerds nerding out and us getting to visit that world that they created in the process. Another thing I loved about this movie was the score from Alan Silvestri. He's one of the greats of all time, and when he kind of knocks it out of the park, he knocks it out of the park, and I loved some of the music in this movie and how it filled out the sequences, especially some of these big battles, the chases, combining Spielberg visuals and action with Silvestri's score. Phenomenal. Also, just the nature of the OASIS, once again, it's so fun to see all of these different types of characters, Easter eggs, hints, references all over the place. It just creates a nerd fantasy. That's really what you're watching here, is a nerd fantasy. It's just vomited all over the screen. It is so much fun to just jump into this world of the OASIS. Along the same line, the narrative of it crafts this adventure where there's mystery and there's riddles and there's problems to solve. And so you're kind of sucked in along on this adventure with them throughout the entire film. So all in all, a bunch of exciting sequences, stellar visuals, and the nature of this voyage that we're on with them, this adventure that we're on trying to conquer an evil corporation, just sucks you in. From there, let's move on to the mixed aspects. The big one that comes to mind is it's an adaptation of a book. And so if you haven't read the book, you can skip over, the next 30 seconds. As someone that read the book, it was a very awkward movie to watch because essentially the way it feels like is that as if you had the premise of the movie and you had a list of the characters and 10 key moments in the story, and you gave that to 2 different writers, one to tell a book story in literature form, one to tell a cinematic visual story, and they didn't cooperate at all. That's what this feels like. Now, obviously, the guy that wrote the book wrote the screenplay with Zach Penn for the film, so that's not what happened, but that's what it feels like. They're that radically different from one another. And I say this is mixed because it's taking advantage of cinematic storytelling. The way that the first key is done is incredibly cinematic. The way it's done in the book is very much literature-based and information-based, so you have all the stuff that it's telling you that if you put that on screen, it would be a terrible movie. And so they found a way to change it. At the same time, it like for me as a person that's not like a book purist at all, I was very kind of uncomfortable watching the movie because of how different things were. Second one on the mixed side is while I talked about how great it is to see all these characters come together in one story, in one movie, on the flip side of that, the way that they're done in the movie versus the book is a lot more superficial. And so once again, this ties back to the book nature of it. The book can tell you a bunch of exposition and it go full on nerd out on the history of whistles found in Captain Crunch and how that tied in with computers and long distance phone calls, all sorts of stuff that's very difficult to put in a film. So when the movie does pop culture references as opposed to the book, it's a lot more like, hey, look, a DeLorean. Hey, look, it's the bike from Akira. You can go either way on it depending on your personality. For me, I dug a bunch of that stuff. I know a lot of people that felt overwhelmed by it, and even as someone that enjoyed it, it was way more superficial than it was in the book, and so some of the enjoyment of that was lost from. From there, let's move on to the bad aspects, and the big one that kind of comes to mind for me would be the characters and the way the real world stuff plays out. So our characters in this, we don't get a lot about them. We don't get a lot of backstory because you're having to build the world of the OASIS and they're going on this adventure and you both have their avatar version of them and then you have your real world version of them. It felt like the real world version of them gets cheated a little bit. Even kind of the world building of understanding why everyone is in the OASIS, how bad the world is, the economics of it all. It's all simplified, dumbed down. And so we don't really understand what's driving everyone to be so obsessed with being inside the OASIS. And then the other one would be some of the sequences in the real world just felt, they felt to me like quickly done reshoots. Like some of the stuff in the stacks with our lead character Wade and his family, I thought was bad. Like some of the worst scenes I've ever seen Steven Spielberg shoot, with the way the acting was done, the way they're framed, everything about it felt out of place to me and odd. Even the way Ben Mendelsohn, our main villain in it, comes off hammier than normal, and the characterization gets very cartoonish in the way he's portrayed in the film. And all of it's in the real world. When it's inside the OASIS, I thought it all worked fine. It was very nicely handled, but very much when it went to the real world and you'd think it would get a little bit more grounded, it just got worse acting and more cartoony. It was very strange to me the way some of that felt. There's also several points in time in the movie where it felt like they cheated the logic or just made continuity errors inside of the film. Like there's a part where something's being televised for one character and you're thinking, shouldn't that have been televised 2 minutes ago for other characters? Like, I don't understand what just happened that changed right now. And there's several things like that where there's just lapses in the logic. But overall, it's a movie that's a fun adventure. It's neat that it exists, but it didn't feel like great cinema to me. It felt like solid entertainment that's fun that I'll like to put on from time to time. So on that, I'm going to give this one a B, a solid film that I did enjoy, and on an entertainment level, I go like a 7.5 on this one. A lot of great sequences in a movie that felt a little bit awkward and thin in the storytelling in general. How about you? What did you think about it? Tell me down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear your take on this one, especially if you've read the book, as well as people if you haven't read the book. Let me know that distinction because I think people are going to have very different interpretations of the film and experiences with it based on your backstory of whether you've seen the movie or not. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies, I want to talk about movies with you. So join me down in the comment section. Let's have a lively discussion. And as always, thank you for watching.